But I'm kind of interested, JJ, to know your experience of taking the class.
Well, as I mentioned, I wasn't really sure why I was there. In the first class, I always tell, even in some of the keynotes, like I had my notepad, and when you started the meditation, I was ready to capture every thought I possibly had. And I remember you saying to me, what's the notepad for? And I was like, well, if I have any great thoughts, and you're like, well, if you have any thoughts, let it go. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, I remember having this. So I think it took me a class or two to get the notebook, to keep the notebook in my car. But thank goodness it's 8 weeks, because it does take all of that time to really learn the behaviors and sort of ways your mind reacts to different situations. And I think you do a really good job of taking us in all different directions so that we can see different patterns and really understand the techniques, so that when we do leave the class, we have a toolkit to work with.
Mm-hmm. I just sort of remember, well, you had a really interesting group of people. I think if I remember correctly, it was all women. And they were pretty invested in the class. So it was great because you all would do the home practice and come back and talk about it. So I guess my curiosity is what was your progression, when you'd go home and do the practices? If I remember correctly, you'd come back to class and you'd be like, sort of surprised at what you learned through doing the practices. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, because I could not believe how busy my mind was. I mean, I'm always a thinker, planner, strategy, but that wasn't the part that surprised me. It was the way I talked to myself.
Mm.
It was the way anytime I had an intense discussion with my spouse, like how I would build up the story to support my case.
Mm-hmm.
I spent so much time dissecting comments, conversations. It was really,
Mm-hmm.
I was completely surprised of how much time I spent in my head.
Yeah. And in someone else's head,
Yeah.
right? Trying to figure out what someone else was thinking or are thinking or are going to think, right? We spend a lot of time ruminating in our own minds and then jumping into other people's minds and trying to figure out what they're thinking. And there's a lot of energy expended there, a lot of energy. And we can feel exhausted by that.
Oh, and I surely did. I mean, I was burned out before I came to your class, and it really took me a few years. I did a lot of reading about it. I attended the Mindfulness 2.0 conferences, which was very exciting. We chatted about, but I also partnered it with some of Brené Brown's material.
Yeah.
That talks about vulnerability and your decisions. And I felt like mindfulness for me was a launching pad to better understand how the inside of myself worked, which
Mm-hmm.
directly impacted the outside.
Yeah, absolutely. And it impacts the people around you, right? Not just you, but we just by our nature, we impact the people around us. And so when we're practicing mindfulness and we're more present, we positively impact the people around us. People can feel and sense that presence, even if they're not fully conscious of it. Maybe they can't express it to you, but it enhances our connections with other people. And those connections are just vital to our well-being as human beings. I mean, we're social creatures, we're designed to be in connection with other people.
And I think that is the real gift. And I felt like this is why it was so important for me to have this topic, to invite you to really share, because I feel like so many women feel like this is something that people do that go to yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I think that because that's what I thought. And I feel like mindfulness is an instrumental life skill that can enrich your life and everyone you interact with.
Yeah. I mean, it really is, it's a very human practice, because what it does is it draws on things that we already have within us. Doesn't take special equipment or special clothes. You don't have to be in a special place. You can really do it anywhere. And you're just really sort of uncovering, reaccessing the things you already have within you. And I think that's much more of an empowering perspective. And it means that we take all this with us everywhere we go. So we can practice anytime and anywhere all day long. that's how it changes so fundamentally the way that we operate, because it does really sort of work its way into the way that we think about everything over time.